Since making my video, The Power Ethic and Why It Is Invalid, I have realized that there is a lot more to be said about the subject, so I have decided to make a series of videos about it. If you haven't already watched that video, I encourage you to do so. A lot of what will be taken for granted here is explained in detail there. Here, I will briefly state the relevant facts about ethics and the power ethic first. Then, we will proceed to explore the power ethic in even greater depth, with a special emphasis on something I see as vital for the salvation of the currently very dire human condition. That something has had various incarnations in such forms as positive thinking, creative visualization, etc., but is currently best known as the law of attraction. The law of attraction, however, and all its previous incarnations that I am aware of, are weak and muted versions of a real principle which I call serendipitous providence, or simply serendipity. It is especially urgent for people to understand about serendipitous providence because the lowliest slaves of the power ethic are currently making their grab for total power. As usual, their demonic plan has as many holes as the vessel the Jumblies went to sea in, and whilst many are aware of that, many more are in denial. Thus we need all the serendipity we can get to take full advantage of what is an amazing opportunity to transcend the power ethic. Escaping the power ethic's grip on humanity seems like a mountain-moving task, but I believe that with enough real faith and wise folly, we can do it. This video is going to explain the why and how of that. Rather than blindly practicing the usual teachings about the law of attraction, it is far more empowering to understand the real nature of serendipitous providence, how and why it works, and what is required to engage with it properly. That is because the law of attraction and its precursors are oblivious to the power ethic. In fact, certain aspects of those teachings negate our natural tendency to engage with the real principle. Thus they work to keep us enslaved to the power ethic, which is the source of all lack and disempowerment. Without understanding serendipity properly, it is much harder to see what is required to escape the power ethic's grip. So let's look more deeply into the power ethic and its relationship to serendipitous providence. I will start by reviewing the relevant information from the power ethic and why it is invalid. Firstly then, what is an ethic? The subject of ethics is often made to appear very complicated, but ethics are actually quite easy to understand. An ethic is simply an idea about how to get more of some valued thing. Effectively, it is a plan, and plans will work or not depending on how good or valid they are. Valid ethics get you more of the valued thing, and invalid ethics don't. The vast majority of ethics we can imagine are absurd nonsense. However, obviously nonsensical ethics are not the only invalid ones. There are many apparently sensible ethics which are invalid, but don't appear to be so on the surface. What distinguishes all the truly valid ethics is that they aim to increase one of what I call the 5 valid values. These are love, creativity, awareness, objective truth, and personal evolution. If you are not aiming to increase any of those qualities for at least one person, without diminishing any of them for anyone, then your ethic is not going to work. It is invalid. This is why ethics and morality are so intimately connected. Valid ethics are moral because the 5 valid values are what defines morality. The valid values are in fact all the same thing seen from different perspectives. They are aspects of a single principle via which the universe works. That is why they are valid values. They naturally increase when one applies any of them as a principle, and applying the principle they are aspects of thus increases them all. That single principle is what I call serendipitous providence. It is how unconditional love creates the universe. In every moment, serendipity provides all entities with exactly what they need to be their real selves. It perfectly choreographs an eternal synchronistic dance whereby we all become aware of deeper and deeper levels of truth. Thus we all learn and grow through our personal creative free will, which is also an inseparable part of the dance as a whole. That is evolution in a nutshell, and it is organized by serendipitous providence via what I call the cycle of the evolution of life. The reason why many invalid ethics seem to be sensible is that we require a deeper level of understanding to see that they don't work. In fact, experiencing their invalidity is a major part of evolution and how we learn and grow. One massive learning puzzle is the power ethic. In spite of being the most invalid ethic possible, it very much seems to work. Seeing through that illusion is an important step in our evolution, one which humanity is currently being challenged to take in order to survive. If that is the case, and it is, then we better understand the power ethic and how to break the chains of our enslavement to it. The power ethic is the practice of trying to gain power over others by using the power one already has in whatever way seems most effective, irrespective of whether that process is moral or not. Generally, this means applying the morally bankrupt philosophy of might makes right. For thousands of years, human history has been a story about people struggling for dominance. The human condition is little different today. In fact, in many ways it is far worse. What is different is that we have a priceless opportunity to put that struggle behind us. The most skillful proponents of the power ethic have accrued so much strategic and technological advantage that they have cast their dice in their final grab for ultimate power. They are masters of deception, subversion, and psychological manipulation, and they practice the power ethic with a heartless and ruthless efficiency. So it seems they have all the aces up their sleeves. However, I think that there is an important dimension of the situation that they fail to understand completely. The power ethic has an Achilles heel, a fatal flaw. It is invalid. As I explained in my previous video, the power ethic has a glass ceiling beyond which it cannot extend. Its success is an illusion. It only works on those who are still enslaved to it. The more enslaved one is, the stronger the illusion. So its most skillful practitioners are in fact its lowliest slaves. For those of us who are ready to break through its glass ceiling, our vestigial enslavement to the power ethic is what seems to give its other slaves power over us. For many, the illusion is dissolving. That realization begs an important question. How can we apply an improved understanding of the power ethic to free us from its self-destructive errors? How can we empower ourselves without infringing upon the empowerment of others? How can we effectively transform situations of lack and suffering into abundance and fulfillment? The answer lies in a better understanding of serendipity. Serendipitous providence is always working to increase the 5 valid values. It never fails because it is the way the universe works. It operates with perfect precision. So if we can understand it and work with it, we can learn to allow the universe to bless us with wonderful fulfillment via its miraculous serendipity. This is the real law of attraction. It always works and always is working. That understanding, however, presents us with an important puzzle. If serendipitous providence always works, then what about when we apply invalid ethics, like the power ethic? Invalid ethics don't work, and on the face of things, that might seem to result in a lack of serendipity. The puzzle is resolved by a clearer understanding of serendipity and universal love. The key is to recognize that making mistakes is an indispensable part of learning. When our values are not valid, when they are immoral or even just imprudent, the results we get are not obviously fulfilling or serendipitous, yet they are still exactly what we need to be our real selves. They are feedback telling us that we have strayed from the easy path of evolution. They are warning us that we have put aside an awareness of objective truth, and that has resulted in an ethical error. This doesn't necessarily mean we have been bad. It means that we are trying to use an ethic that is invalid, one that doesn't work. The fundamental nature of the power ethic is that it is an argument with life, a denial of truth. We are tempted to use it when we think we know better than life, when we are confused about what we would find fulfilling. What naturally results from such an argument is a misperception of what we have created for ourselves. Through a foolish lack of imprudence and morality, we lay up for ourselves an appearance of denied need and bad luck. This can cause us to lose faith in life and react by attempting to force it to comply with what we imagine we want. That is how we fell into the trap that is the power ethic in the first place. To one degree or another, we have all tried to use what power we have to gain more power in order to make life comply. That, in a nutshell, is the essence of the power ethic. And as I explained in my previous video, it is invalid. In other words, it doesn't work, even though it often seems to. It is an unhappy illusion, but it is only really unhappy from a personal perspective. Life knows that exploring the power ethic, i.e. arguing with life, is a necessary stage of evolution. One might say it is a soul's teenage rebellion phase. Power, as it is conceived of by those who dedicate themselves to the power ethic, is a perversion of the empowerment that life constantly blesses us with. When we lose faith in life and attempt to make it comply with our ideas of how things should be, we actively frustrate our own fulfillment. That is foolish, but the power ethic is a seductive trap. So don't beat yourself up if you notice ways in which you have fallen into its trap. Exploring it is a necessary and in fact heroic journey. Subsequently, learning that it is a trap is an important part of every soul's evolution, a victorious homecoming. Although it is actually the most invalid ethic possible, the power ethic very much seems to work, at least temporarily. Throughout the world, we can see that people seem to profit from unethical acts. However, they are actually hurting themselves. They just don't realize it yet because they are in denial. When we practice the power ethic, we are actually disempowering ourselves by enslaving ourselves to it. We get an illusion of extra power and abundance in exchange for a guilty conscience. Stifling the voice of conscience is done by repressing our feelings. Thus it squeezes the joy from our lives. The lowliest slaves of the power ethic have crushed almost every drop from their hearts. They must have vast wealth with which to buy every available luxury, yet it can bring them no joy because they are numb to it. They are like the pirates of the Caribbean who stole the Aztec gold, cursed with a desperate inability to feel. The empty illusion of power is not worth the price, but the wisdom we eventually glean when we see through the illusion is. Make no mistake, even the most demented psychopath has a conscience. They just seem not to have one because they have numbed themselves to it in order to cope with the fact that it is full to overflowing with guilt and shame. Numbing ourselves to our conscience is a trap that we have all fallen into. But falling into it has not been for nothing. It has been a way via which we humans have developed our understanding in the most effective way. Competing with each other to see who could win the race to the bottom has honed our intellects to razor sharpness. Now, however, we must use that sharp focus to see through the power ethic. It is time to wake up and learn to align ourselves with the principle that delivers real empowerment and fulfilling abundance. As the title of this video suggests, employing the principle of serendipitous providence involves faith and folly. We can indeed move metaphorical mountains with faith if we develop enough of it, and faith is intimately entwined with folly. However, for thousands of years, we humans have been busy trying to make life comply with our personal will instead. This has resulted in a general lack of understanding of the true nature of faith and folly. So let's look at what faith and folly really are, and how they can help to free us from our enslavement to the power ethic. This is a scientific channel. By that I mean that it is based on faith and folly. I wouldn't be surprised if that statement seems more than a little eccentric to you, even crazy. Surely science is about objectivity and rationality. If we start basing it on faith and folly, won't we destroy it under an avalanche of woo-woo nonsense? Indeed, science is objective and rational, but those things are not in conflict with real faith and folly. Only in commonly held wrong ideas is that so. Real faith and wise folly are in fact the driving force of science. At least they used to be. Sadly, science has now been seriously contaminated with anti-faith and a more foolish kind of folly. Thus, established science has very much turned into a religion, in the same way that most truly spiritual endeavours have been corrupted and enslaved by the power ethic. Later in the video, we will look at a key point in history where Christianity was turned into a more power ethic compliant religion, and how it was done. First, though, I need to explain what real faith and folly are, how that understanding shines a light deeper into the nature of the power ethic, and also reveals how to align ourselves with serendipity. In order to understand what faith and folly really are, we need to look at what epiphysics has to say about them. Epiphysics understands that the universe is organized and manifested via what I call the cycle of the evolution of life, one significant form of which is the zodiac. So we can learn about the fundamental nature of things by looking at the appropriate essences within the cycle and their relationship to the cycle as a whole. That is a huge topic which will require many future videos, and is far too much to go into here. For now, we will simply look at the essences that underpin Faith and Folly. These are the opposite signs, Sagittarius and Gemini. Sagittarius is the sign of faith and has a fire of air essence. That might be described as a fiery passion for clarity. This passion drives all form of questing. Its energy eases the quest, bolstering courage and confidence. It is about trusting that there are truths to be discovered within any circumstance that life has provided serendipitously. Such truths are woven into the very fabric of the universe. Some call them, and the understanding built upon them, logos. They are ethical truths in both the sense of being moral and of being effective. They liberate and empower us to be more self-determined and fulfilled. The fundamental essence of the opposite sign, Gemini, is the inverse of Sagittarius. That is to say, whereas Sagittarius is fire of air, Gemini is air of fire. Air being the clarity with which we perceive things, and fire being the passionate energy of our creative choices. So air of fire represents perceptions which are expressions of fiery passion. That mix of perception and passion makes for very energetic perceiving, which often manifests as curiosity. So Gemini is the eternal fool exploring a plethora of novel ideas. It is the essence of open-mindedness. Since curiosity killed the cat, it can very much be what we normally think of as foolish. However, it needn't be, and in fact curiosity and open-mindedness are indispensable features of evolution. So we cannot avoid being eternal fools, but we can learn to be wise ones. Although Gemini and Sagittarius are opposite phases in the cycle, they do not oppose each other. Open-mindedness and a passion for truth are complementary, but when the power ethic contaminates the mix, complementary things can seem to be antagonistic. A lack of open-mindedness can make Sagittarian passion closed-minded, and a lack of faith can make Geminian curiosity shallow, fickle, and dishonest. Many people are in the habit of calling their religions their faith. That is true to the extent that it is about questing for deeper truth. However, if the quest lacks open-mindedness, it can become the opposite of real faith, dogma. It then becomes a passionate attempt to apply the power ethic by insisting that others believe in what amounts to a mental straitjacket. In such circumstances, all our Sagittarian passion feeds into an unwise foolishness and a lack of real faith. We need real faith and wise folly to help us realize the truths that life is pointing out for us. So cultivating true faith and wise folly are ways in which we can align ourselves with the serendipitous and unconditionally loving will of life. In that way, we can master the principle of serendipitous providence and get it to deliver fulfillment rather than need, abundance rather than lack, and joy rather than suffering. Now we can see that science is about real faith and wise folly, because the scientific method is simply a systematic way to organize our curiosity and passion for realizing deeper truths about life. I call the truths that we currently base our understanding of life on our life axioms. In science, axioms are fundamental facts that we base any given understanding on, because they seem self-evident to us. In a future power ethic video, I will explain why there are an infinity of new, deeper life axioms to discover. That fact makes the idea of an authority that has the final word on any scientific endeavour absurd. Yet, in recent years, it has become more and more common for people to insist that officially recognised experts know better than the rest of us, and that we shouldn't question their pronouncements. Censorship has become rife. However, the people who advocate for it reveal themselves not to be real experts, but proponents of the power ethic, its desperate slaves, in fact. They are trying to turn science into a religious dogma for power ethic purposes. Whilst it certainly helps to listen to experts, ultimately, we cannot just hand over control of our understanding to anyone. We are responsible for choosing our own clarity because we cannot avoid having to choose which experts to believe. Thus, we have to learn to think for ourselves. An understanding of real faith and wise folly shines a brilliant spotlight on the defects of what has become known as the law of attraction, and to a greater extent most of its previous incarnations. The key to understanding this, and how to correct the defects, lies in the concept of negative thinking. In the New Age movement, it is common for anyone who points out an obvious lack of fulfillment to be accused of negative thinking. Then the dogmatic reaction is to attempt to shame them for their awareness and shush them into silence. Far from being a valid ethic, that practice is in fact highly unethical because it is closed-minded and lacks both real faith and wise folly. In my opinion, it is a reaction that has been cultivated by skillful practitioners of the power ethic for hundreds of years. Its purpose is to keep the masses enslaved to the power ethic by distracting them from their real needs. Make no mistake, there is a form of thinking that might be called positive, but it does not involve ignoring the truth. There is also a form of erroneous thinking that might be called negative, but its error does not lie in a recognition of truth. It is easy to get confused about that, because this real form of negative thinking is often triggered by the emergence of a truth. Thus, it has been easy to divert people into the New Age concept of negative thinking. When we see a painfully difficult truth, it often triggers the imagining of all sorts of fearsome ideas, which are not truths, but only speculations. Then we often react by resisting the truth instead of reminding ourselves that the speculations are only fearsome imaginings. If we resist the truth, we will attract more painful reminders because growth involves seeing truths, and the very purpose of life is lovingly to reveal them to us. We cannot build understanding on lies. So by resisting our new life axioms, we deny ourselves the fulfillment of our real needs. We place ourselves in the unhappy state of denying that we even have them and accusing ourselves of negative thinking if we acknowledge our resultant suffering. Real positive thinking is about having sufficient real faith and wise folly to recognize difficult truths whilst not getting caught up in fearsome imaginings. It is about how to use open-mindedness and the courage to see things as they are in order to uncover and heal our emotional wounds. Only thus can we stop denying our needs and work our way out of our enslavement to the power ethic. In short, we need to develop a far more empowering faith. How to develop and use a deep passion for objective truth and its healing power will be explained in part 2 of this series. For now, let's look at how Christianity was messed with in order to make it much more power ethic compliant. In that process, we will be uncovering knowledge about how to align ourselves with serendipitous providence. Whether it is true that such a person as Jesus actually existed, and if he did, whether he was the one and only Son of God or not, is irrelevant to this discussion. Someone was sharing those teachings, so we may as well call that originator Jesus. We can learn a lot from the evidence that has surfaced about early Christian teachings and how they became altered at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Even though Christianity was seriously damaged then, it was not completely neutered. We can see that by the fact that the European peoples, who were naturally receptive to the more ethical understandings that remained in Christianity, developed more ethical cultures as a result. That enabled them to become far more successful and eventually to establish Western civilization. However, the elite slaves of the power ethic, those who have sunk to the lowliest levels of enslavement to it, are now doing their best to destroy the progress made over the past 1700 years. So it is vitally important to rediscover the lost teachings and understand them properly. Epiphysics helps us do that. At the Council of Nicaea, the Bible was heavily edited to make it much more power ethic compliant. Thanks to the discovery of buried texts in recent decades like those in the Nag Hammadi library, we can now begin to see how the beating heart of Jesus' teachings on the empowerment of real faith was ripped out. For example, in the King James Version of the Bible, verses 23 and 24 of John chapter 16 read as follows: "And in that day ye shall ask me nothing. Verily, verily, I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall ask the Father in my name, he will give it you. Hitherto have ye asked nothing in my name. Ask, and ye shall receive, that your joy may be full." The traditional interpretation Christians put on this passage is that they must say something like, "Father, in the name of Jesus, please move that mountain for me." Yet they can do that all day and the mountain remains firmly rooted where it is. When their pleadings in Jesus' name have not manifested the answer they are hoping for, Christians then have reference to a passage like Matthew 17, verses 19 to 20, which reads as follows: "Then came the disciples to Jesus apart, and said, Why could not we cast him out? And Jesus said unto them, Because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you." Thus, when their conception of praying in the name of Jesus doesn't work, Christians tend to see themselves as lowly sinners with faith less than a mustard seed. It never occurs to them that there might be something of vital importance that was edited out of John 16. Ironically, that something has indeed prevented them from developing the requisite real faith. Also, the doctored passage has created a confused idea about belief. We are definitely not required to believe in any dogma. What does help is a strong belief in serendipitous providence, which can only be developed from experience. New texts discovered in recent years contain clues which can help us reconstitute what Jesus was actually conveying in such passages. In the edited version of the Bible, Jesus exhorts his disciples to pray in his name. The natural interpretation of that phrase is that he meant for them to preface all their prayers with, "In the name of Jesus." But what if that phrase was deliberately edited to foster that misinterpretation, because the correct interpretation was making Christians more and more difficult to control? A fragment of a newly discovered text has Jesus exhorting his disciples to pray from within his name. It is a very subtle difference, but one which invites a whole new interpretation. A massive chunk extracted from the Bible in 325 AD was the Gospel of Thomas. Thankfully, a very well-preserved text was recently discovered and now resides in the Nag Hammadi Library for all to see. It contains further clues about Jesus' real teachings about moving mountains. Verse 48 of Thomas reads as follows: Jesus said, "If two make peace with each other in a single house, they will say to the mountain, 'Move from here,' and it will move." And verse 106 says, Jesus said, "When you make the two into one, you will become the children of Adam, and when you say, 'Mountain, move from here,' it will move." Also, the text of John 16:23-24 has now been reconstituted to read as follows: "All things that you ask straightly and directly from inside my name, you shall be given. So far, you have not done this. Ask without hidden motive, and be surrounded by your answer. Be enveloped by what you desire, that your gladness be full." Let's remind ourselves that the Bible is full of examples of Jesus' habitual use of allegories in the process of conveying his teachings. By combining these clearly allegorical new texts with teachings from other traditions, some have interpreted them to mean that Jesus was saying that thought and feeling must be married within to bring the asked-for thing into existence. I concur with that interpretation, but not with the way that marrying thought and feeling is often imagined to happen. Many people are now familiar with the law of attraction, and its teachings do contain a method that might be described as an effort to marry thought and feeling. However, that method is heavily contaminated by the New Age conception of negative thinking. It does nothing to free us from the power ethic, because it is unethical. It denies the truth. Practitioners of the law of attraction try to marry thought and feeling by imagining what they think they want with such deliberation that they begin to feel as if they already have it. The phrase "fake it until you make it" is often used in that regard. It is a kind of deliberate daydreaming, and if you can do it, it may often seem to work. However, an understanding of epiphysics reveals that any success that seems to have been achieved was probably a form of precognition, and didn't really enhance one's realization of deeper fulfillment. In fact, one's denied need is probably buried deeper as a result. The realization of deeper fulfillment is what really works, and is much more empowering. So let's look at how that can be done. The Bible can give us a clue, and this time it is a clue that managed to avoid deletion at the Council of Nicaea, although it does require proper interpretation. Joel chapter 2 verse 12 has this advice to give about what to do in the face of an allegorical plague of locusts, which is to say a grievous situation of denied need. The passage reads, "Therefore also now, saith the Lord, turn ye even to me with all your heart, and with fasting, and with weeping, and with mourning." What does that mean in practice? I contend that it is advice about how to make our thoughts and feelings one within us. Many years ago, when I still watched TV, a morning program had a phone-in about what people hated. A woman phoned in saying she hated the phrase good grief. She saw grief as all bad. Of course, she meant grief in the sense of bad things having happened. It is an understandable attitude to take, one which I think is quite common. However, it belies an understanding of serendipitous providence. The grief we experience is never just random badness with no purpose behind it. It always challenges us to dig deeper and find our empowerment. Often this means discovering how we have been giving our power away to the power ethic. When we do that, grief is transformed into grieving, which is a healing process that empowers us to take care of our needs and thus transform lack into fulfillment. In comprehending how this healing comes about, it helps to be aware of the nature of the planet of healing, Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer. His essence is about seeing what we know on a feeling level. Thus, it represents the marriage of thoughts and feelings. This diagram from my thrones video reveals that Chiron has a throne about 4 degrees into Aquarius. This means that his essence strongly affects the cusp of Aquarius, which is the point in the cycle of the evolution of life where new life axioms are realized. So Chiron's throne being just beyond the cusp of Aquarius makes his essence an imperative to recognize new truths. Our new life axioms have a sharp, pointed nature, because the truth is one, whereas lies are legion. We always get the point one way or another. A realization of truth is a happy eureka moment. However, not realizing a truth can have painful consequences. A chronically denied truth remains as a deepening wound. Denial of these wounds is comforting but disempowering. If we deny our needs, they get denied. Our wounds are like control buttons, vulnerabilities for the proponents of the power ethic to exploit. However, each time they are exploited is a healing opportunity. Grief is always a serendipitous reminder of a liberating and empowering new truth. Grieving usually involves painful emotions. How painful depends upon the amount of need we have been in denial of, how much ease the level of our faith affords us, and how skillful we are in allowing our feelings to flow. A toxic body and mind makes us numb to our feelings and thus hinders feeling flow. Done properly, both physically and mentally, fasting can relieve us of our toxic burdens. In my next Power Ethic video, I will share knowledge about how to realize healing life axioms, enhance our faith, and encourage more healing flow. I want to finish by explaining why I see the alignment with serendipitous providence as vitally important for humanity. I think it is literally vital, meaning that it is a question of survival. The lowliest slaves of the power ethic are currently at the helm of this world, and they are steering it in a very negative direction. They seem to have all the power and to be succeeding in fooling and intimidating people into surrendering their freedom. If they win, it's game over for humanity. We cannot match their power whilst we still flirt with the power ethic. They are masters of that game. So from a power ethic perspective, they seem to have us in checkmate. However, there are many creative people who have already developed reasonable levels of real faith and wise folly. They care about the truth and are seeing through the lies and machinations. In their actions, we see what real empowerment is about. The situation is so dire, however, that we could do with some miraculous help. I believe that is exactly what can be achieved by aligning ourselves with the principle of serendipitous providence. I think it really is capable of moving metaphorical mountains. That is all for now. Thank you for your attention.